The mastery of procrastination. The seventh step toward riches is decision. An accurate analysis of over 25,000 men and women who had experienced failure disclosed the fact that a lack of decision was near the head of the list of the 30 major causes of failure. This is not a mere theory. It is a fact. Procrastination, which is the opposite of decision, is a common enemy that practically every person must conquer. The reader will have an opportunity to test their capacity to reach quick and definite decisions when they finish this book and are ready to begin putting the principles into action. Conversely, an analysis of several hundred people who had accumulated fortunes well beyond the $1 million mark disclosed that every one of them had the habit of reaching decisions promptly. Furthermore, they had the habit of changing these decisions slowly, if and when they were changed at all. People who fail to accumulate money, without exception, have the habit of reaching decisions, if at all, very slowly. Compounding this error, they also have the habit of changing these decisions quickly and often. One of Henry Ford's most outstanding qualities is his habit of reaching decisions quickly and definitely, and changing them slowly. This quality is so pronounced in Mr. Ford that it has given him the reputation of being obstinate. It was this quality which prompted him to continue manufacturing his famous Model T, described as the world's ugliest car when all of his advisors and many purchasers were urging him to change it. Perhaps Mr. Ford delayed too long in making the change. But the other side of the story is that his firmness of decision yielded a huge fortune before the change in model became necessary. There is little doubt that this habit of definiteness assumes the proportion of obstinacy. But this quality is far preferable to slowness in reaching decisions and quickness in changing them. The majority of people who fail to accumulate sufficient money for their needs are generally easily influenced by the opinions of others. They permit newspapers and gossiping neighbors to do their thinking for them. Opinions are the cheapest commodities on earth. Everyone has a flock of opinions ready to be wished upon anyone who will accept them. If an individual is influenced by opinions when they reach decisions, they will not succeed in any undertaking, much less in that of transmuting their own desire into money. If you are influenced by the opinions of others, you will have no desire of your own. It is critical to keep one's own counsel when beginning to put these principles into practice. By reaching one's own decisions and following them, one should take no one into their confidence except the members of their mastermind group. And one must be very sure in the selection of this group, choosing only those who will be in complete sympathy and harmony with their purpose, close friends and relatives, while not meaning to do so, often handicap a person through opinions and sometimes through ridicule, which is meant to be humorous. Thousands of men and women carry inferiority complexes with them all through life because some well-meaning but ignorant person destroyed their confidence through such opinions or ridicule. You have a brain and mind of your own. Use it and reach your own decisions. If you need facts or information from other people to enable you to reach decisions, as you probably will in many instances, acquire these facts or secure the information quietly, without disclosing your purpose. It is characteristic of people who have but a smattering or a veneer of knowledge to try to give the impression that they have much knowledge. Such people generally do too much talking and too little listening. One must keep their eyes and ears wide open and their mouth closed if they wish to acquire the habit of prompt decision. Those who talk too much do little else. If you talk more than you listen, you not only deprive yourself of many opportunities to accumulate useful knowledge, but you also disclose your plans and purposes to people who will take great delight in defeating you because they envy you. Remember also that every time you open your mouth in the presence of a person who has an abundance of knowledge, you display to that person your exact stock of knowledge or your lack of it. Genuine wisdom is usually conspicuous through modesty and silence. Keep in mind that every person with whom you associate is, like yourself, seeking the opportunity to accumulate money. If you talk about your plans too freely, you may be surprised to learn that some other person has beaten you to your goal by putting into action ahead of you the plans of which you talked unwisely. Let one of your first decisions be to keep a closed mouth and open ears and eyes. As a helpful reminder, it is suggested to copy the following epigram in large letters and place it where it will be seen daily. Tell the world what you intend to do, but first show it. This is the equivalent of saying that deeds and not words are what count most. Freedom or death on a decision. The value of decisions depends upon the courage required to render them. The great decisions which served as the foundation of civilization were reached by assuming great risks, which often meant the possibility of death. Lincoln's decision to issue his famous Proclamation of Emancipation, giving freedom to the colored people of America, was rendered with the full understanding that his act would turn thousands of friends and political supporters against him. He knew, too, that carrying out the proclamation would mean the death of thousands of men on the battlefield. In the end, it cost Lincoln his life. That required courage. Socrates' decision to drink the cup of poison rather than compromise in his personal belief was a decision of courage. It turned time ahead 1,000 years and gave to people then unborn the right to freedom of thought and of speech. The decision of General Robert E. Lee to part ways with the Union and take up the cause of the South was a decision of courage, for he well knew it might cost him his own life and would surely cost the lives of others. But the greatest decision of all time, as far as any American citizen is concerned, was reached in Philadelphia on July 4th, 1776. On that day, 56 men signed their names to a document which they well knew would either bring freedom to all Americans or leave every one of the 56 hanging from a gallows. You have heard of this famous document, but you may not have drawn from it the great lesson in personal achievement it so plainly teaches. We all remember the date of this momentous decision, but few of us realize the courage it required. We remember our history, the dates, and names of the men who fought Valley Forge and Yorktown. But we know little of the real forces back of these names, dates, and places. We know still less of that intangible power which ensured freedom. Long before Washington's armies reached Yorktown, it is often falsely imagined that George Washington was the father of our country and that it was he who won our freedom. The truth is, Washington was only an accessory after the fact, because victory for his armies had been ensured long before Lord Cornwallis surrendered. This is not intended to rob Washington of his glory, but rather to give greater attention to the astounding power that was the real cause of his victory. It is a tragedy that history writers have missed even the slightest reference to the irresistible power which gave birth and freedom to the nation. It is a tragedy because it is the selfsame power which must be used by every individual who surmounts the difficulties of life and forces life to pay the price asked. Let us briefly review the events which gave birth to this power. The story begins in Boston on March 5th, 1770. British soldiers were patrolling the streets, openly threatening the citizens. The colonists resented these armed men and began to express their resentment openly, hurling stones and epithets at the soldiers until the commanding officer gave the order, "Fix bayonets. Charge." The battle resulted in the death and injury of many. This incident aroused such resentment that the Provincial Assembly called a meeting to take definite action. Two members of that assembly were John Hancock and Samuel Adams. They spoke up courageously, declaring that a move must be made to eject all British soldiers from Boston. Remember this. A decision in the minds of two men might properly be called the beginning of the freedom enjoyed in the United States. Remember, too, that the decision of these two men called for faith and courage, because it was dangerous. Before the assembly adjourned, Samuel Adams was appointed to call on Governor Hutchinson and demand the withdrawal of the British troops. The request was granted, but the incident was not closed. It had caused a situation destined to change the entire trend of civilization. It is strange how great changes, like the American Revolution, often have their beginnings in circumstances that seem unimportant. It is also interesting to observe that these changes usually begin in the form of a definite decision in the minds of a relatively small number of people. Few realize that John Hancock, Samuel Adams, and Richard Henry Lee of Virginia were the real fathers of the country. Richard Henry Lee became an important factor because he and Samuel Adams communicated frequently by correspondence, sharing their fears and hopes. From this practice, Adams conceived the idea that a mutual exchange of letters between the 13 colonies might help bring about the coordination of effort so badly needed. In March of 1772, Adams presented this idea as a motion to establish a correspondence committee among the colonies. Mark this incident. Well, it was the beginning of the organization of the far-flung power destined to give freedom. The mastermind had already been organized, consisting of Adams, Lee, and Hancock. The Committee of Correspondence provided the way for increasing the power of the mastermind by adding men from all the colonies. This procedure constituted the first organized planning of the disgruntled colonists. In union, there is strength. The citizens had been waging disorganized warfare against the British soldiers, but nothing of benefit had been accomplished. Their individual grievances had not been consolidated under one mastermind. No group had put their hearts, minds, souls, and bodies together in one definite decision to settle their difficulty, until Adams, Hancock, and Lee got together. At this time, the British were not idle either. They had their own planning and their own mastermind, backed by money and an organized army. The Crown appointed Gage to replace Hutchinson as governor of Massachusetts. One of the new governor's first acts was to send a messenger to Samuel Adams, attempting to stop his opposition through fear. The spirit of what happened is best captured by the dialogue between Colonel Fenton, the messenger, and Adams. Colonel Fenton stated, "Governor Gage has authorized me to assure you, Mr. Adams, that he has the power to grant you such benefits as will satisfy you the attempted bribery, provided you cease your opposition to the government's measures. The governor advises you not to incur His Majesty's further displeasure. Your conduct makes you vulnerable to punishment, but by changing your political course, you will not only gain great personal advantages, but you will also be reconciled to the king." Samuel Adams had two choices. He could cease resistance and accept the bribe, or he could continue and risk being hanged. Clearly, the time had come when Adams was forced to make an immediate decision that could cost him his life. Most people would have found such a decision difficult to make. Most would have sent an evasive reply, but not Adams. He insisted that Colonel Fenton give his word of honor to deliver the governor's reply exactly as Adams had delivered it. Adams's reply was, "Then you may tell Governor Gage that I believe I have long since made peace with the King of Kings. No personal considerations will induce me to abandon the just cause of my country. And tell Governor Gage that Samuel Adams advises him not to further offend the feelings of the indignant people." Comments on this man's character seemed superfluous. It should be obvious that the sender of this message possessed the highest degree of loyalty. When Governor Gage received Adams's scathing response, he flew into a rage and issued a proclamation stating, "I offer and promise His most gracious pardon to all persons who will immediately lay down their arms," excluding from this pardon only Samuel Adams and John Hancock, whose crimes are too flagrant to admit of any other consideration than deserved punishment. As they would say today, Adams and Hancock got it. The angry governor's threat forced the two men to make another, no less dangerous decision. They hastily convened a secret meeting of their most staunch followers. Here the supreme intelligence began to gain momentum. After the meeting opened, Adams locked the door, pocketed the key, and informed everyone present that a Congress of the colonists was necessary, and that no one would leave the room until such a Congress had been decided upon. A great uproar ensued. Some weighed the possible consequences of such radicalism, old man fear. Some expressed serious doubts about the wisdom of such a decisive decision against the will of the crown. But in that locked room were two men impervious to fear, blind to the possibility of failure, Hancock and Adams. Under their influence, the others were persuaded to agree that the Committee of Correspondence should negotiate the convening of the First Continental Congress in Philadelphia on September 5, 1774. Remember that date. It is more important than July 4, 1776. Without the decision to hold the Continental Congress, the Declaration of Independence could not have been signed. Even before the new Congress first met, another leader, Thomas Jefferson of Virginia, published a general review of the rights of British America. His relationship with the Crown's representative was as strained as Hancock and Adams's with their governor. Shortly after its publication, Jefferson was informed that he was subject to prosecution for treason. Inspired by this threat, one of Jefferson's colleagues, Patrick Henry, boldly voiced his opinion, concluding with the classic line, "If this be treason, make the most of it." It was precisely these men, without power, without authority, without military force, without money, who sat and solemnly pondered the fate of the colonies for 2 years. This continued until June 7, 1776, when Richard Henry Lee stood up and addressed the assembly with a startling proposal. "Gentlemen, one proposed that these united colonies be, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they be absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain be, and ought to be, completely dissolved." Lee's astonishing proposal was debated heatedly, and for so long that he began to lose patience. Finally, after several days of debate, he spoke again and declared in a clear, firm voice, "Mr. President, we have been debating this matter for several days. This is our only course. Why, sir, do we delay? Let this happy day give birth to the American Republic. The eyes of Europe are upon us. She demands from us a living example of liberty. Before his proposal was finally voted on, Lee was forced to return to Virginia due to a serious illness in his family. But before leaving, he placed his case in the hands of his friend, Thomas Jefferson, who promised to fight until a favorable decision was reached. Shortly thereafter, the President of Congress, Hancock, appointed Jefferson chairman of the committee to draft the Declaration of Independence. The committee labored long and diligently over a document that, if passed by Congress, would have meant that every person who signed it would be signing their own death warrant if the colonies lost the war with Great Britain. The document was drafted, and on July 4, 1776, Thomas Jefferson stood before the assembly and fearlessly read the most momentous decision ever committed to paper. When Jefferson finished, the document was put to a vote, adopted, and signed by 56 men, each of whom risked their lives for their decision to sign. This decision created a nation destined to forever bring humanity the privilege of decision-making. Analyzing the events leading up to the Declaration of Independence, one can see that this nation was born from a decision crafted by a mastermind composed of 56 individuals. It should be noted that it was their decision that ensured the success of Washington's armies, because the spirit of that decision was in the heart of every soldier, and served as a spiritual force that defied failure. It should also be noted that the force that gave this nation freedom is the same force that every person striving for self-determination must utilize. This force consists of the principles described in this book. It is not difficult to identify at least 6 of them in this story: desire, decision, faith, persistence, a supreme intelligence, and organized planning. A common thread running through this entire philosophy is the idea that thought, backed by strong desire, tends to transform into its physical equivalent. Don't look for a miracle here. There is none. You will find only the eternal laws of nature, accessible to anyone with the faith and courage to use them. They can be used to liberate a nation or to accumulate wealth. Those who make decisions quickly and decisively know what they want, and they usually get it. Leaders in any walk of life make quick and decisive decisions. This is the main reason they are leaders. The world tends to give way to the person whose words and actions demonstrate they know where they're going. Indecision is a habit that usually begins in youth. It takes root as a young person moves through school and college without a clear goal. The main weakness of all educational systems is that they fail to teach and encourage the habit of making definite decisions. The habit of indecision acquired in school carries with the student into the profession they choose, if they choose one at all. Typically, a young person fresh out of school looks for any job they can find. They accept the first one that comes along because they've developed a habit of indecision. 98 out of 100 people working today are in their positions because they lacked the determination to plan a specific job and the knowledge to choose an employer. Definiteness of decision always requires courage, sometimes great courage. 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence staked their lives on it. A person who makes a definite decision to take a specific job and make life pay the price he asks is not staking his life. He is staking his economic freedom. Financial independence, wealth, and desired business and professional positions are unattainable. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added to you. Matthew 6:33. May the Lord bless you and guide you in every good work.